Hello, everyone. It's Alex here, and welcome back to the Keeping Up with the Calligraphers podcast. After a bit of a long break, this marks the start of season 2 with some new topics, new friends, and new episode formats coming your way. And what better way to start us off than by collaborating with fellow calligraphy artists and podcasters, Shaochen and Alane of the Calligraphy Biz Corner podcast. Shaochen and Alane are two full-time wedding calligraphers and business educators with over a decade of business experience working with hundreds of wedding, luxury, and corporate clients. They're both 10 out of 10 humans and, as you'll hear from this episode, align with us on just about all things calligraphy, business, and mindset. So if you're already following them, take a second listen. You never know what sort of nuggets you'll need to hear again. And if you're not already following their podcast, then you're in for a sweet treat as we are sharing the conversation we had with them about marketing and pricing for on-site events in your business. We hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we did, and thanks as always for keeping up. Hello, and welcome to Calligraphy Biz Corner. This is our first episode back after our summer break. We actually also are releasing a summer catch-up episode today. So be sure to listen to that either before or after this one. But we are super excited to kick off the fall season with a very special collaboration episode. While we focus primarily on wedding calligraphy services, it's no secret that on-site events are a hot topic right now. And it's not just live calligraphy that I've been seeing on my Instagram feed and Pinterest boards. I've been seeing a lot of bottle painting and watercolor portraits. One of our guests today, Alex, she actually even does splash tattoos in front of an audience, which I think is so cool and also so nerve-wracking. I can't imagine. Like, no room for error there, right? But we're really excited to welcome two live event pros as our guests, Kat and Alex. They are also the hosts of an event calligraphy podcast, which you may know of, called Keeping Up with the Calligraphers. So if you like what you hear from them today, then definitely be sure to go give their podcast a follow afterwards.
The session was so good, and I just loved getting to actually chat with Kat and Alex after interacting with them virtually for so long. I guess we're still virtual, but this is kind of as close to like in-person interaction as we can have. But the conversation flowed so well between all of us, and we only really got like 2 questions that we wrote down asked, and we had a bunch of like little sub-questions and tangents that we went off to. So it was just a really great flow. I think my favorite part of the conversation was when we chatted about authenticity, staying true to yourself, alignment to your business, and basically how that alignment has led to more success, which is definitely a recurring theme on our show. And I just love how both Kat and Alex are event calligraphers, and they show us how different our businesses can look. So like Alex is full-time in her calligraphy business, while Kat has what she describes as 2 full-time jobs. She has a corporate job while she's also running her calligraphy business.
Yeah, I feel like we could have just kept chatting for hours.
Yeah.
Like the conversation was just so fun. It was so fun to hear their different perspectives and how they've kind of carved their own niches within the live event space. But same as you, I really admire how both of them have created those like unique paths for themselves, and they're really focusing on what works for them, not what works for other people. And I feel like that's such a good reminder for anybody in any industry. I also really loved our conversation around pricing. I feel like it got a little bit spicy, but in the best way.
We asked the questions that we really want to ask other calligraphers, so we did not hold back.
Yeah. And they were just so open and honest with us, which I really, really appreciate. And hopefully, like, those conversations happen more and more, because I feel like they're so important for just, keeping our industry standards and helping other people who are just starting out, one, feel less alone, but also help them feel empowered to make the decisions that are right for them.
Well, whether we like it or not, holiday season is coming up right around the corner, and that's probably the busiest time for live events. So our goal with today's episode is to equip you with some key live event tips around marketing and pricing, and also some prep, so that you can either book your first live event or get some timely reminders as we head into this event season.
So let's do a quick intro of Kat and Alex before we dive into the episode. That way you can learn a little bit more about them. Alex Hirsch is the calligrapher behind Signs of Our Lives, and Kat Brown is Kat Lauren Calligraphy, and they are both live event calligraphers bringing a fresh perspective to guest favors and client gifting. After starting in the wedding industry, they expanded their services to provide live calligraphy at corporate events and activations for brands like Prada, Maker's Mark, LA Magazine, Netflix, and more.
Alex and Kat specialize in providing personalized, Insta-worthy guest experiences by customizing favors on site using their artistry to hand engrave, hot foil, or paint while entertaining and engaging guests. And they also host the Keeping Up with Calligraphers podcast, as we mentioned, where they share their knowledge and insights to educate event artists and industry professionals with the overall goal of elevating guest experience. Let's go to their interview. Welcome, Kat and Alex. We are so excited to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for waking up early to join us and find a time that works for all of us. I feel like we've known each other for years, and even though we've never met in person, I kind of feel like we have, but it's nice to have this like almost in-person interaction here on our like video podcast. We've even gotten to work together, if you guys remember back in 2021 with like a luxury brand that I was helping to hire calligraphers for. So I just love that we're continuing to collaborate in different ways, even though we're not even in the same state. I feel like the calligraphy community is so strong in that way. So we've already shared your intro with our listeners. I'd love to have you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves in your own words. So Alex, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for having us. I know we've been chatting about doing a collab episode for a while now. So I'm so excited it's finally happening. And yeah, so I guess a little bit about me. I am a professional calligrapher. I like to say calligraphy artist because we do calligraphy on basically multiple different surfaces over here. And I've been doing this for about 7 years. I've been full-time in my business for 3 years. I live in San Diego, California. I co-host a podcast with Kat, Keeping Up with the Calligraphers, which I think you've already mentioned.
Awesome. And what about you, Kat?
Hi, everybody. I'm also super excited to be here. So as you mentioned, I'm Kat. I am a full-time behavior analyst, also a full-time business owner. I don't like saying it's a side hustle, or I don't like saying part-time in my biz because that just doesn't feel like it has enough respect for the time that I put into it. So full-time in both, trying to balance that and also being a twin mom and doing all of these other things. So my days are very jam-packed, but I've been in my business for 6 years, pivoted like so many times. I feel like I'm currently in the middle of a pivot, but I'm really excited to be here. I'm talking about live events because that's definitely my bread and butter lately.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you guys and to share your wealth of knowledge. Shaochen and I are definitely more like wedding calligraphy based. So it's really exciting to be able to bring some voices onto the podcast to share more about live events and live calligraphy. I love that you said calligraphy artist, Alex. I feel like that does sum it up very, very well. So to just jump right into the conversation, looking back at all of the live experience that you both have, what is like the top marketing advice that you would give to yourself when you were just starting out and trying to book your first live event? If you each have like 1 to 2 marketing tips that you could share to kind of help our listeners get started in that industry, that would be awesome.
I think my advice would be before you're even like trying to put like yourself out there, I think is really taking the time to understand what it is that you do and kind of clarifying your message about it. Because if you're not kind of confident in being able to talk about it, then that does show in your words that you're putting out to people. So whether that's on your website, your Instagram, an email pitch, even if you're at a networking event and talking to people, if you don't kind of have a clear idea of what it is that you do and the value that you bring when you're sharing that to people, it can come off just a little bit disjointed. And it's kind of hard to be confident if you don't have that really kind of clarified. So I think really just taking the time to understand like what it is that you do, how you do it, kind of like your process around it, and what value that you are bringing to that audience that you're trying to market to will put you in a much better spot to be able to then talk about it and get people excited about it.
I want to double tap into that a little bit because I mean, I've been following you for a long time, as I mentioned, Kat. And I feel like when I first started to follow you, your brand was like pink and soft and dainty and delicate. And then all of a sudden you had your kids and then you had this shift. I don't know if having the kids had anything to do with it, but I felt like then your brand identity completely shifted to being like this dark vixen, glamorous celebrity calligrapher. And I feel like in that moment, your brand became so clear, right? And you totally stood out in that very unique way. Could you just tell us a little bit about am I right? Sorry, this is my outsider perception of your brand, but I have so much respect for that kind of transformation that you went through and how you did that for your business so quickly and also just so much with so much clarity, like you just said.
It wasn't I think it just happened around the kids because I was like, I need to get my rebrand out before they get here because I'm not going to have time after. But felt like I was at the beginning, where we all start, you're trying to do different things. You're trying to find your niche. I was still kind of doing wedding stuff and so much respect to you guys because honestly, it's just not a good fit for me. And especially with my kids, just trying to balance the back end stuff with my actual career and then that. So that just wasn't working out. But I was just doing what I thought my clients wanted, which is that soft, that romantic, the stuff that I was wanting to create kind of fit with that. And I was like, I literally don't even like pink. I'm not a blazer girly. This is really dumb. I'm attracting projects that I don't like. I need to just switch it and then just be me. And so I think that also helped shift everything because I was like, this is just me now. If you guys don't like it, whatever, I'm into it. It's going to find the people that it needs to find. So the shift was quicker and easier, I think, because it was stepping into my authenticity, not this weird shadow of what I thought I want it to be. So it's been really nice to just have everything match me.
That's so powerful. I feel like you could absolutely feel it when you shifted into that. And I love that you kind of talk about how you realized that what you felt, what you were doing before didn't feel like you. And now it's all aligned and you can really see that and feel that through your brand.
That makes me feel so good. Thank you.
And I feel like that also adds to what you were saying earlier about being confident behind what it is that you're offering. If you can 100% stand behind your brand, your messaging, what you're putting out into the world, I feel like that probably is also what just helps you grow and flourish in your business because you're showing up with so much more confidence than maybe you were before as this brand that you didn't feel fully aligned with, right? So maybe even you were a little I don't know how I want to go about pitching myself, or I don't know if I feel really comfortable pitching myself to these clients or whatever the case may be. But when you can fully stand in your power, I feel like that just changes the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still get the imposter syndrome, but it's less about what I'm trying to put out there and the value. That's not the case anymore. Now it's just all right, can I step into this space and be I can do that. What am I doing? I'm fine.
Yeah. And then the piece about, sorry, there's just so many gems in there. I feel like I want to highlight for the listeners is you are now attracting the people that you want to work with, that you want to be around. It's just a good lesson that don't try to cater to what other people want because when they come, that's not necessarily aligned with what you want anyway. So just be who you are and you'll attract more of the work that you want to do. Right.
Yeah. And I think even when the ones that aren't maybe fully aligned come and ask to work with me, I feel confident being hey, that's not in my wheelhouse. If you're really wanting to work together, everything is figure outable. I'm happy to do it. But I even just feel confident being that's not the best fit for me. But if you want to move forward, I'll do it. I'll figure it out. But I'm going to put my own spin on it. You're not coming to me here's the mood board. This is exactly how I want. Be that's not how I work. But thank you so much. I can do this. And if you would like that, well, let me know and I'll send you my contract.
Alex, let's shift to what your tips are for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so proud that Kat made that shift. And I agree. It was so awesome to see her come into her power. And I think we all love that, just as women too, of stepping into your power. I don't know why I can't move forward without saying that. My main source of advice is just putting yourself out there and connect with local people. So if you're in a big city or a small city or just a neighborhood, like there's people you can connect with that want exactly what you're doing. Going back to like marketing, like putting yourself out there to like, if you're really into tennis, like go to your local tennis club and say, hey, I'd really love to like customize water bottles. Like, do you think everyone could come with like their Yeti and I'll engrave it for them? Something like that, where you're kind of figuring out like something that's like of your interest, as well as things that you're already kind of doing, people that you're already connected with, and using your resources to really like then work on your skills, right? And to get into those like events and work on all of the new things, that the new learning experiences that come with being an event calligrapher. That's much less pressure, I think, to put on yourself than like, you know, having a big luxury brand be the first person you reach out to at the first event you do, right? So that's something that I recommend, is kind of like start small, start with the community you already have, or start building one, and especially like the interests that you have as well.
I love that, because I also feel like it's less intimidating when you're starting with something, well, like you said, something small, but also when you're starting with something that you already love too. Like if I love to read, like going into my local bookstore feels way less scary than like you said, pitching myself to a luxury brand if I've never done this before. And I think it's also always about having fun too. That's something that like I'm trying to come back to in my business, just like doing things that feel fun. And so thinking through like what actually feels fun to do right now to just help me get my feet wet in this industry, or, you know, kind of finding whatever my niche is going to be within it. I think that's really great advice.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. That's something we talk about on our podcast, is like, is event calligraphy even like fun for you? Like if you're not a person who likes talking to people, you know, maybe it's not for you. But I think like, you know, if you do really enjoy engaging with people and engaging in your community, even if it's a small one, like I think it's so awesome to again, yeah, like exactly what you said, tap into the joy, tap into the fun. Like we are entrepreneurs, like we are creative entrepreneurs. We don't need to be doing like the hustle grind bullshit, you know. We can tap into the joy of life and incorporate that into our businesses, right? So such great advice.
Yes, amen. I'm here for that.
I was gonna say, I think too, like, I don't know, I feel like smaller events or like things that you're interested in don't necessarily ever get the spotlight. Like everybody wants to share their work with Dior. Everybody wants to share their work with like Joe Malone. But I am equally as pumped to work like a CrossFit Christmas party where every single person there is so excited about the ornaments that I'm doing. I just did like a 90th birthday party where they were just like doing favors and stuff like that. And like the gratitude and joy, like the interactions that you get there, like shouldn't be overlooked, honestly. Like it's not just about being like a luxury calligrapher, right? Like, I mean, if that's your vibe, like I guess, but like don't put yourself in that box of thinking that's the only thing that's successful. Like there's so many fun events out there. And if you think like retail is the only way that you can do it, like you're missing out on half the fun.
I love that you're kind of expanding the way that we're thinking about live events, because I'll be honest, as someone who doesn't do them a ton, I still mostly think about them as luxury corporate retail. So I'm actually curious, just like, how did you, for example, book a 90th birthday party? Like, how do we start to drive awareness? Like when we're talking about marketing, right? How do we start to drive awareness of live calligraphy as something that individuals want and not just necessarily retail or corporations or luxury?
For me, I think that goes back to my messaging and like understanding again, like the value. Like the value isn't in like just the transaction, right? Like I think that's where retail brands have taken advantage of it. But like you're looking for people that value that experience, like that interaction, you know, that authenticity. So again, I think if you're able to harness, if that is the value that you feel like you bring, you know, or whatever else. But I feel like when you get clear on your messaging, like when you're talking to other people, then you can say like, well, I can bring this to your party, or I can bring this to your retirement, you know, whatever it is. Like it makes it so much easier to be adaptable and flexible, because again, you're not talking about like paper to pen skills. You're talking about your interpersonal value that you're bringing to people. Like that's the luxury. It's not like the $200 like dollar bottle that you're engraving, you know?
Yeah, I think that was a really good segue too, because I think it's really interesting kind of going back to what you were saying before about it's not just retail events. Like you both have very clearly carved out niches within niches for yourselves, which I find so interesting. So can you share a little bit about how you both have kind of like gone down even farther? Like you're live event artists, live event calligraphers, but within that, you've even found your own unique positions within that market. So I just love to hear a little bit about how you both kind of found your footing in like these different areas.
So for me, Alex here, for me, I did start with wedding signage. That was the first thing that I did. I forgot to kind of mention that in my intro is I used to do wedding signage, hence my name, Signs of Our Lives. And then, I found that was really stressful for me over time and it wasn't something that brought me joy. But I was like, what the hell am I doing? And I did start doing retail events. They also didn't really bring me that much joy. So for anyone who is starting out, retail events are really great when you're starting out to like start with those. At the same time, those aren't the only events. Like I think, we're kind of doubling down on that today. Like those aren't the only things you can do if you want to be adding events to your services as a calligrapher or a lettering artist. So for me, I started working with some like spirit brands. And then I found out like at liquor stores and stuff like that. And those were really fun. And then I started getting invited to like whiskey festivals and stuff like that. And then I kind of realized for me, I thrive off of like being at those sort of like fun events. And I also like connect with like the bar industry in my community. San Diego has like a really tight knit and like so welcoming spirit like industry group. And so for me, like that was kind of something that I figured out and was like, oh, like I can reach out to more people that are like this. And that kind of helped me, I guess, what you kind of do what you were saying of like niche into another niche.
Okay, but wait, I mean, this might be a tangent, but you also are a live event artist in a different way in that you also do like flash tattoos, right?
Oh, yes.
Can we talk about that niche? Whereas this is a live events episode.
Oh my gosh. Wait. Okay. So yeah, I don't know about other engravers, but I know for me, I literally every single event I've ever worked, I've been asked, oh, do you also do tattoos? Because you're working with an engraving machine. It sounds kind of like a tattoo machine.
I think you have a lot of visible tattoos.
I do also have a lot of visible tattoos, and I'm wearing all black. And then also just having a steady hand, people are so impressed by that to see a live artist like doing their thing and it just show up exactly how the artist wants it to, right? Like that's something most people can't do. So yeah, eventually I was like, you know what? I'm going to see if I can learn how to tattoo because enough people asked and like, I'm kind of interested in it. The guy who did my tattoos, I asked him if he would mentor me. He'd been doing tattoos for like 10 years. He'd owned a shop in Nicaragua. So he was pretty familiar with like teaching and managing and stuff like that. He was just super talented with fine line tattoos and then decided to take me on as his apprentice, which was so amazing. And I would have never been able to do that had I not been like full time in my business and had also like all these 6 degrees connections, right? To meet him. And so, yeah, then he was like, let's do some flash events. Like that's a really good way to like A, get your name out there as like a new tattoo artist, and then B, just to like really practice your skills because they're a lot smaller. Like a small tattoo is a lot easier to do than a big tattoo. So yeah, then I started doing that and that was super awesome. I got hired for like my first flash tattoo event with a brand last fall. I haven't really been promoting that honestly because I was so busy with Signs of Our Lives doing like engraving and painting and foiling and stuff for brands. But I'm really hoping that more brands are like wanting to bring that VIP experience to like special events because it's so cool, right? To walk away from an event like, hey, I just got this tattoo.
I feel like it fits within your niche too. Like that fits with like the audience that's going to these like whiskey festivals and like it just like fully aligns with you. I love that.
I love how everything is tying in together today. It's like being true to yourself, being what feels authentic to you, following the things that bring you joy, that light you up. If something isn't lighting you up, it's like, okay, what am I going to do next? Connecting with people in your community. Like it's such a good full circle conversation already. So I love that.
I feel like we always hear people talking about that, like get to the things that bring you joy. But I feel like there's not a lot of talking about like, you do have to do the work to figure out what does and doesn't bring you joy. And that is that building piece in your business that a lot of people, I think, want to skip over. And like, truly, you just can't do that. Like, you can't fast forward through that. Like, it's shitty to be in that spot when you feel not aligned or whatever else. But truly, like, that's how you clarify your message. That's how you know what you get super, fired up and passionate about. So I just think not us specifically, but like leaders in our industries and stuff like that, a lot of people talk about like getting to that happy spot, but they really don't talk about like, you cannot like fast forward through that. Like, we're all like multiple years into our businesses now. Like, you're seeing year 6 for me. Like no one saw years 1 through 4 because I was still building, like trying to figure things out, like trying to find my voice, trying to find all of that. Like, that's how that works. And you can't fast forward through that. Like, it's very rare for someone to just like come up and then all of a sudden just be like big and doing all the things. Like, you got to put in that work to find what all of that is.
We're all seeing everybody's year like 5+ for the most part, right?
I was going to add to that too. I kind of mentioned it when I was chatting, but I think outreach is something too that some people are afraid of. I think Kat kind of talked about kind of getting your messaging honed in on. And then once you do have that, whether you're going to networking events or you're just like cold emailing people or calling up, DMing people on Instagram or cold calling, if anyone calls anyone anymore, then I think those are really good ways too. Like, once you do find some things that you're interested in, part of doing the work is actually reaching out to people. And it could be, one person replies out of 50, but that's one person and that's exciting and that gets your foot in the door. So
well, because also doing that outreach work is also what's going to help you continue to hone in and refine your messaging. Like, you have to test the waters with these things. You can't just be like, oh yeah, everything's done and now I'm going to go be a booked out calligrapher. Like, you're going to get turned down. Things might not hit for different people. So like, you have to experiment and, actually put all of these things to the test too as you're going. So I love that reminder.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. I think that was a great discussion about marketing. So let's talk a little bit about sales, specifically pricing. So like Alane and I, we talk about pricing calligraphy services like wedding work, calligraphy products. We always talk about how like pricing is personal. You need to start with your own financial goals, use that to determine your hourly rate, and then like calculate other costs you might have, kind of go from there to build your pricing. The thing that I sometimes struggle with like live events is that it feels like the market rate or like what's happening in the industry seems to factor in a lot more than just taking in your personal financial goals. And so I guess our question is like, how do you go about finding what the market rate is for live events? Because it's not something that's necessarily, no one's like posting a spreadsheet of rates for you to check, right? So as a new calligrapher, how do we even know where that like line in the sand is as far as what the market's charging?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a problem. I think pricing transparency is a problem for everybody. This is a personal stance. Again, like you said, pricing is very personal, but like, I just don't think it serves anybody to not have that transparency. So actually, Alex and I both have our pricing on our website. For me, it functions as I have all these other things that I'm doing and I don't want people in my inbox. Like, I'm sure you're lovely people, but like, if we can weed each other out by me just having my pricing on my website, then I'm not wasting your time. Like, I'm not going back and forth on a bunch of emails just to find out it's not going to be a good fit or it's not going to work for your budget. So I'm hoping that I am seeing more people do that or people talk about that. I'm not like going through and looking at people's websites, but I am hearing that be more of a discussion. So I would start with looking at specifically people in your area, because I think where you're located definitely will also dictate kind of what the range of pricing is in that area. So I would start with looking at other calligraphers in your area. Start with just looking at their websites. We're not blind copying people's pricing, but I think that'll help kind of get a sense for what that is. Don't look on Etsy would be my other piece, because that's just like not like, even if you're like, I'm going to look up what this engraved bought, whatever, like just don't. Like, that's very different than looking up live events. I know Nibteak, if people are familiar with that too, it's like a directory, I guess, of different calligraphers. So you can also go on there. Not everybody has their pricing on there, but you can search, I think, by different locations. And some people do have their pricing on there as well. So even if it's not on their website, there's a pretty good amount of calligraphers on there. So you could start with looking at prices on there too.
Again, it goes back to that community piece for me, is like, if you can build community with some other artists in your area, and if you're the only artist, I'm sorry, you can reach out to us. We're here for you. But if you're solo, it's going to be really hard. Like, it's a lot easier when you can find at least one other person who's doing something similar to what you do that you can kind of chat with and like be like, hey, what are you charging for this? Right? Like, obviously that's not the first thing you do when you meet this person. Like, you kind of want to build relationships with people first and then kind of start having those conversations. One of the most important things I've done, like as a business owner even, is just connecting with other business owners, other artists, and having people I can talk to about these sort of things. Because not everyone is going to be transparent online, and not everyone's going to post their stuff online on their website or on Instagram or whatever. So I think, the more you can have these like in-person or even virtual connections with people, I think the better off you'll be. And so in terms of like finding, where are you with this? I want to make sure that like we're aligned, like we're providing kind of like a similar experience. And then just to add on to that, going on another tangent here, that, pricing, a lot of times it's very different, obviously, than if you're pricing for products. But there's, different things that you're providing as an artist. So the communication with the client, the process behind everything, the guest experience, the actual artistry, right, that you're providing. There's lots and lots of factors that determine how your price is going to end up, as well as like your location and the demand and those sort of things. Kat and I are in Southern California. That's going to be a way different market than, Chicago or, I don't know, somewhere in the Midwest, maybe.
Middle of America.
We're not great at geography. Where, it might not be as high demand, right? So pricing might be different.
Yeah, no, that's real. I'm glad that you brought that up because that's something that we talk about too when pricing wedding calligraphy services. Like, I say this all the time, whether it's on the podcast or like with my mentees, you're not just providing a welcome sign. You're not just providing a seating chart. Like, there's all of these other factors that you're bringing to the table. And it's the exact same thing with live event calligraphy. Like, you're not just showing up and doing the writing. There's all of these other things that go into it. So I'm glad that you brought that up as a reminder for people to kind of factor that into whatever they're setting as their hourly rate, or if they're doing, a flat fee or something like that when they're pricing their work. Just to kind of follow up to this. So say somebody they go and do their local market research. They're asking some people, getting some gut checks on, starting pricing. How do you do you have any tips for using that market rate to then determine what you should personally charge for your services? Like, how does your experience maybe play into pricing or something like that, or some of those other factors that you were even talking about? Because I know like we all want to be very conscious about not, undercutting our market, but we also don't want to overcharge if maybe like we are just starting out and our experience isn't, we are in year 1, not year 7, and we're chatting with you about pricing. Like, what are your tips there?
So I think there's a couple things here. So one, I do think we need to define undercutting, because I think that's a huge thing in any market, right? Like, whether you're an artist or you're a realtor, right? Like, people are undercutting everywhere. And I think that's something that's more intentional. Something where you're like, oh, like, I know this person charges $100 an hour, so I'm going to charge $50 an hour, right? So that I get the job. I think that's something that's more done with intent, as opposed to when you're just starting out, you're kind of still figuring things out. And I think that's okay. I think it's kind of giving yourself room to grow. Like, everyone starts out somewhere, and you can start like increasing once you kind of start figuring more things out and you work with more brands and you're like, oh, like, they're willing to pay this rate and it makes more sense. And I feel like I'm providing a better experience. So that's kind of my take on that, is that if you're not doing anything intentionally, right, it's okay. I think we all need to give ourselves grace because I think we all start somewhere in this industry.
Yeah, I think so. You had already talked about and highlighted talent is only one piece of it. I do think talent is kind of two parts. One, it is if you were doing calligraphy, for example, or, whatever it is, you could be a watercolor portrait artist. You could be doing painting, bottle painting, whatever else, obviously we want you to have the skill set, but also the confidence behind that skill set to do it quickly and with people watching. I think the other things that go into it in terms of experience is your knowledge of your craft to troubleshoot on site. So you show up and all of a sudden this bottle is maybe not the same as the one that you were testing at home. How are you going to pivot that? Okay. You forgot to charge your engraver that died. Now what do? Do you have a backup engraver? Are you switching to paint pen? How are you clearly communicating that with your client to maintain those expectations? You thought there was only going to be 50 people. You show up, it's actually 150 people. How are you, supporting your client in terms of maintaining guest experience, expectations? How are you doing crowd management, right? So talent is one piece of it. And I think that's where you'll hear a lot of people say there are other skills that you need to have or at least be ready for. And that's where we make that recommendation of starting smaller, because a lot of times you can't really create that in a false sense to know how you're going to navigate it. You really sometimes can only do trial by fire with that. And if you're not comfortable with that, then maybe live events aren't a good fit and that's okay. Right. Or maybe something like that just gets you excited. Right. And you're I feel I could figure it out. Then maybe it is a good fit. So I think it's those management skills. It's your own interpersonal skills. Especially if you're doing retail, I'm not necessarily there to sell, but I want to attract people. I definitely want to bring that value. Right. And if it's a live event, the whole point of me being there is to enhance their guest experience. And if I'm just kind of sitting there a bump on a log, waiting for people to come up to me, I'm not really enhancing their experience in any way. So how are you interjecting that energy into what you're doing? I think those are the things that when someone's new, that you're still kind of honing those skills in. And as you start feeling more comfortable, confident with those things, I think that's where your pricing kind of grows from there. But I think that's also not to say that you can't start out with a great experience, right? And that you can't maybe start a little bit higher off the jump if you know you already have that. Maybe you did something before that skill transfers over. I did luxury wedding catering as a job when I was in college. So I already kind of had that interaction in place. So that was actually a place I was really comfortable, but I didn't feel like my skills were aligned yet. So I actually started a little bit lower. So I think there's a couple different things to consider. And as you gain experience with your skill set, you're adding different maybe services, supports, things like that. That's where you can kind of incrementally start to grow. But I think going back to what Alex was saying about undercutting is, I think there's a difference between maybe charging lower than what others are charging just based on what is a fit for you and your skill set versus I think of undercutting as you're intentionally lowering your prices to beat somebody out for something. So whether that is you got an email and, the vendor was hey, just as an FYI, we're collecting quotes from a couple different people. And your response back is, well, I can do it for $25 an hour cheaper than the other person. Or if just from someone in your community, maybe you saw them post about it or someone's reaching out to a couple different people and you're I'm making the choice right now to price lower than what I would normally charge to try to book this. That's not serving anybody. That's not serving you. The value you think you're going to get out of that, of booking that job, regardless of who the client is, even if it's some big celebrity event, all you're attracting is one, just bad karma. Please don't do that. But also now that person's just going to keep coming back to you, seeing that you are not firm in your pricing. And a lot of times you're going to get pressure from that person to either do more for the same price or to continually accept a lower rate. So it really just doesn't serve anybody when you're intentionally undercutting people. But I do want to highlight that is not the same as someone new that is maybe pricing a little bit lower than what you would recommend as someone that is already experienced. And they're trying to figure that out for themselves. Like that is not the same. So I do feel like highlighting that is important.
You're so right. I think that there is a difference between undercutting or even, purposefully undercharging versus just saying, okay, well, if Kat, I'm just throwing out random numbers, but if Kat charges 200 for on-site and I'm just getting started, so I feel like 175 maybe feels a little more aligned for me right now because I don't have all of these other things that you're talking about. Like you said, there's a huge difference between that.
Yeah, that's not undercutting.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I think I think that a lot of people, I don't know, I could be speaking out of turn, but I think that there is like sometimes fear around like, I don't want to devalue our industry because there's so much talk around. And I think it's highlighting what the differences are and letting people still feel empowered to charge what they feel comfortable and confident charging versus the pressure of like, you're going to lower our industry standards and we're all going to come after you.
Yeah. I think again, like, please don't charge like $50 an hour. Like that's just not valuing your time. Like even if you're brand new, you don't have those skills, like what you're offering is still worth like a certain amount of money. And I don't want to put out a number because one, I'm pretty sure that's illegal, but also two, it totally depends on where you're located and everything else. So there is definitely like a floor that I definitely recommend just as a value, don't want to go under, but like there's different clients for different people. Like, I don't know. I don't always understand when people are like, you can't charge less than this because then everyone's going to expect it for less than that. Well, if someone's going to accept less than that, like that wasn't your client anyway. So I don't know why you're so upset about it. Like they weren't going to book you anyway. So let them book that person.
Yes. Thank you for that. I feel so aligned right now because Alane and I had this exact same, it is actually a bullet point in our notes that there's like someone for everyone at different price points. And okay, sorry, not to make this a little more spicy than it is. I think part of the reason we wanted to bring up this conversation is I have had conversations with calligraphers who feel pressured to charge a certain amount because people are like, you need to at least charge this amount, otherwise you're undervaluing our industry. And it's not like $50, by the way. It's like something that feels totally reasonable.
Like $200.
That feels totally reasonable. And it's for somebody's like first gig, for example. And I just feel like, one, if we go back to the pricing is personal, like pricing is personal, knowing that, of course, there's also like some level of don't undervalue the market. We have to balance those things together, right? And I really don't like when people are pressuring each other to be like, you can't charge this amount. Well, but like that person needs to make that pricing decision for themselves. And so what I'm hearing you say is like, research is important. Research the market rates, talk to the people in your community. I love the idea of going on a boutique and seeing what's available publicly to see people's prices. Understand what that range is in your local area so that you kind of know where you can work within for pricing. And then within that range, come up with something that feels comfortable for you, right? I feel like if I summarize the advice, that's kind of what we're saying. But like, I just really would love to get away from this idea of calligraphers telling other calligraphers what they should be charging. Because I personally felt that way sometimes from people. And I'm like, guys, it's my business. Like, sorry. I can decide if I want to be there for 4 hours. Like if my minimum is 3 hours on site or 6 hours on site, So
I don't have a minimum. No, we talk about that all the time. I don't have an hourly minimum. And if I did, I would miss out on a whole lot of really fun events because I was like, it's not 3 hours. I'm going to pressure. Like I've done events for like an hour and a half and I'm like, that was amazing. And now I get to go home, but if you are pricing with integrity, it will be okay. Because I do think that if you were just pricing because somebody told you to price that high, one, I think that you are going to have that imposter syndrome. I think that is almost the fastest thing to trigger it, honestly, is like, I'm charging this person. Now I don't feel confident if I can deliver. That is a horrible spot to be in. And I don't want that for you, right? Like that's going to suck the fun right out of it if you're having a panic attack every time someone walks up to you at this event, right? Like I don't love that for you. But if you are honestly trying to do pricing in a way that feels aligned with you, you have that integrity of I'm making this decision for me. I've done some market research, so it's not fully, like uninformed, I guess. Like you're not just like picking a number out of nowhere. Like definitely do a little research, but do it with integrity, price with integrity, right? Like what you feel good about your offering. I think that is where we should all be at. And then I do think there is a conversation about gently coaching people up to understand the different factors, to push forward and not be complacent with their skill set, whether that is, like your artistry or your interactions, whatever else. Like that's a place where you as a business owner should be hopefully seeking that mentorship or, reaching out to other people within your community to continue to build those skill sets. But yeah, just run your business with integrity. And I think you're going to be in a pretty good spot.
Okay, so now that we've got our pricing figured out, one other thing that we didn't cover yet, but I feel like it is important to talk about, is the necessity of having a contract. I think even if it is your very first event. So I was going to say, Alex, do you want to just jump in there?
I'm the way I'm so embarrassed because I don't even want to give a time amount to this, but I was without a contract for way too long. And even when I did start having a contract, that's a whole other episode. But even when I did, it was PDF. Can you please sign this in DocHub or whatever? And I did not have a CRM. So all about the client experience now. And yeah, I think having a contract is so important. I think it just makes me feel so much better knowing that if there is someone who pays late, I actually just had that recently. Someone owed a shit ton of late fees because they paid so late, and I was able to enforce that, right? It sucked for me to have to do all that extra admin, but it made me feel better about okay, this is late, and you guys have to figure this out, how to pay more now, as well as then just if you work overtime, the time allotted, you're agreeing to 3 hours, but then you worked 3.5, you should get paid for that extra half hour. So the amount of times having a contract has saved my ass, and just makes me feel so much better about it because it's hey, per our contract, this is whatever you need to communicate about. Yeah, and it also just makes me feel professional as well.
I feel like people are oh, a contract, that's so scary, or no, I don't want to hold my clients to X, Y, or Z. But it's it's not about that.
Yes,
Number
you
one,
do.
it does, yeah. Well, it makes you look and feel so much more professional, which I think also just does wonders in helping the growth of your business, because how you think about yourself and your business is exactly that informs how you present yourself. So if you are presenting yourself as even if you're just getting started, or it's a side hustle, or it's a hobby, and you have a contract, you're going to feel 100 times better. But yeah, even just to have the peace of mind to know, even for weddings, no, in your contract, I was supposed to have your guest list due, 2 weeks before your wedding, and now it's going to be late, and I need to charge a rush fee, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
It just helps you come with such a clearer head. So, Kat, I know that you have worked with the legal page for creating a contract specifically for live events, right? This
Yes.
is live event specific contract. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, honestly, it is wild if you are out there working live events without a contract. And I say that with so much respect and love. Honestly, if you're out there without a clear expectation of if you accidentally mess something up, who's responsible for that product? Especially if you're doing retail, are they going to deduct that out of your pay, or can they just expense that out? If you are at an event and again, someone interacts with you in a very uncomfortable way, who's going to be responsible for that? Are you, please just get up and leave if that's the case, right? If you don't feel safe or whatever else, but do you have a contract in place that covers that? Who's providing the product? I didn't know to clarify those things before I was established. Wild that I was just walking in and engraving these $400 fragrances, and I had no clue. Thankfully that was not a problem I ever ran into, right? But I do feel there is a very big liability that we either kind of willfully are ignorant about, or just truly, as we're trying to figure it out, we haven't come into that realization yet. And that's very wild to me that so many of us, myself included, we're running around without a contract. I bet you 2,000% and top of an NDA that you're going to have to sign a contract with a lot of these big retailers, with any, of these like large event producers, things like that, because they're not about to take that liability. So you got to come to the table and protect yourself and advocate for yourself. And so I was very worried for our industry with that. And so I reached out to the legal page and I was like, hey, I really feel like this is a huge gap. I would love to serve my community in this way, but like clearly I'm not a lawyer, but I would love to tell you what I think should be included for that. Because I feel like all of us were making these like Frankenstein contracts too of like, I bought this calligraphy thing, but it doesn't really fit that. So I'm just going to kind of like add this in, but I don't know if that's right. Like we just like can't be doing that. Like I'm not trying to scare anybody, but like, again, it goes back to the confidence of like, if shit goes sideways, like I know exactly what I need to do. The expectation is clear for your clients and there is clarity on who's responsible for what and what we need to do to move forward. So that is why I reached out to Paige. She put together a contract for that. So that is now available. And it is not just for calligraphers. If you guys have people that are doing other type of, like the title of itself says live calligraphy, because that is my zone of expertise. But it is an editable template. I don't know if that's a word, but it can be edited. It's an editable template. So if you need to switch out for live watercolor portraits, for bottle painting, for like illustrations, whatever it is that you do, it can be easily switched out. So don't be deterred by the title if that is the case. We also noticed that a lot of calligraphers were subcontracting each other. So we also put together a clause if you are hiring other calligraphers underneath you or to go out to live events on behalf of you. So Shaochen, when you were doing, when you were contracting all of us to work for that big brand, like that would be the perfect clause for that. So you're sending it to your client saying, I might be sending someone that is not me. However, I'm going to be, coordinating, or whoever's going to be coordinating, that expectation is clear. So we also put that together, just preemptively seeing the need as, the industry is growing. So that is available now. And we will put a link in the show notes.
Thank you for taking initiative on behalf of the calligraphy community to help us have that legally reviewed contract, because it wasn't something that ever existed before. I went out and bought those right away when you posted about them. So we'll definitely share the links in the show notes. And we'll also share other ways to get in touch with you. Can you guys just tell us really quickly how our listeners can connect with you, listen to your show?
So our podcast is Keeping Up with the Calligraphers. And you can find that we have an Instagram page. So that's like the easiest way. You go to Instagram and then you click into there for all the podcast links. But it's on Apple, it's on Spotify, anywhere where you can listen to podcasts, basically. And then obviously, like our personal or our business Instagrams, I'm Signs of Our Lives. And that's honestly where I spend the most time chatting with people in DMs. And then Kat.
And you can find me at Kat Lauren Calligraphy. It is Kat with a C. And if you are looking for our podcast Instagram, it is Keeping Up with the Callig. But if you can't find it, it's in our bios.
Do we get an update on when your next episode's coming?
Such a great question. So we're kind of the opposite of you guys, where we're not as scheduled.
Loosey goosey.
Yeah, we're a little when we find time, we figure it out. We're on a little bit of a summer break right now, but we're hoping to get back probably by the time this is released, honestly. So in the fall, we'll be back for season 2 with more good, juicy info for being an event artist.
Trying to be open, transparent, honest. Like, we didn't intend necessarily to take a summer break. Like, we kind of did because I was going to Kenya and a bunch of other things, but like just trying to also show like it's okay if you have to put things on the back burner to prioritize other things in your business. So that's what we're doing, because things keep popping up and personal things happen and business things have been happening. So we've definitely intended to be back a lot sooner, but we will be back as soon as our schedule allows us to be like fully prepared for our audience, because we're also not in the business of just putting things out there just to be put out there. So trying to respect our own boundaries while still showing up for everybody.
We hear that. That's exactly why we did our summer break. We were like, sometimes you just got to put pause so you can focus on some other things.
Well, thank you for prioritizing us. We really appreciate it and taking the time out to speak with us today. That was such a fun session.
Thank you for showing
Yeah,
that.
thank you. This was awesome. I hope we get to chat again. and we really loved being on.
Yeah, we might need to do a
let
part
us know if
2.
there's a part 2.
Thanks for listening to our show. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us wherever you're listening and leave us a quick rating.
And don't forget, you can find us on Instagram at Calligraphy Biz Corner and send us a DM to let us know how you're liking the show. Until next time, keep the ink flowing and the dreams growing.
Hey friend, welcome to Calligraphy Biz Corner, where we spill the ink on our real-life experiences as creative biz owners.
We're your hosts, Alane and Shaochen, full-time wedding calligraphers and business educators with over a decade of experience working with wedding, luxury, and corporate clients, and we've mentored hundreds of calligraphers just like you.
And we're in your corner. Let's uncover the business that supports the life that you want and leave the overwhelm and imposter syndrome behind. Grab your coffee and notebook and let's dive in.